I'm Adam Bryant. I'm author of the new book from Harvard Review Press called The Leap to Leader: How Ambitious Managers Make the Leap to Leadership. And I'm going to be talking with Dove about why reluctant leaders often make the very best leaders. We'll be talking about why you need to wrestle with the question, who are you as a leader, and what your 3 core values are for leadership. And we're also going to be talking about our theories for why there are so many bad leaders in the world still today.
Welcome back to part 2 of our delicious conversation with Adam Bryant. Adam is the author of a brand new book called Leap to Leader: How Ambitious Managers Can Make the Jump to Leadership. Adam is I'll try that again. Adam joined XCO Group. The XCO Group is a senior leadership development and executive mentoring firm as the managing director in 2017 after 30 years as a journalist, and 18 years of that was spent with the New York Times working on the iconic corner office column for the New York Times. He has interviewed over 1,000 CEOs, and as I said, his new book is The Leap to Leadership. In part 1 of the show, we talked about what is that leap to leadership, what is it, and we're going to go deeper into what it means and some of the practicality around that. You know, we really took a look at this advantage, really, which is what is a reluctant leader? That maybe the reluctance of somebody, even if you're listening to this and you are the CEO and you're looking down and you think, well, I think this person's a really good fit, that is actually stopping and asking yourself, is this person really, maybe that's not what they actually want. Maybe that's a presumption that they'd want it. And Adam brought up how important that is for you as somebody who would like to make that leap to actually stop and ask yourself, do I really want to be a leader? And what does it really take? And really sort of pulling away the veils of illusion. That was a very important part of part 1 of the show. And if you didn't catch part 1 of the show, of course, go back, listen to it, take some notes. And you hear me say this all the time. Take notes. It's amazing what happens in your brain when you stop and pause and take notes, because you can get hit by something that seems like it's really interesting and really important. And then, squirrel, something happens and you get distracted and you can't even remember that. Taking those notes engages a part of your brain that not taking them just doesn't do it. And it allows you to retain, even if you never look back at the notes again, there's something happens inside of your brain that allows you to take it in much better. So go back to part 1. I highly recommend it. So let's jump back in here, because we want to really take a look at the practicality here, the practicality of the mindset. So Adam, from your point of view, let's just go to the next level of this. What does it mean to leap to leader? What does that practically mean?
Yeah, and I mentioned in the first part to this idea of wrestling with the question, who are you as a leader, and being really spending some time to think about your personal values and why they're important to you, and sort of make those real and authentic. Another big challenge that people face when they move into leadership roles is around the idea of decision making. Because when you're moving up in your career and you say, okay, I have a big decision to make, it can be natural and understandable to want to have as much information as you can possibly get before you make that decision to ensure the best outcome, right? There are no guarantees, but you want to ensure the best outcome. And a lot of those decisions at earlier and lower levels, there is that data, and maybe the decisions are clear, but you need to recognize that moving into those bigger leadership positions, there's going to be less and less data, right? You're very often looking at tough decisions where there is no obvious right answer. Whatever you decide is probably going to upset somebody or some group of people. There's a higher risk you're going to be wrong because there are fewer guarantees. And you need to be comfortable with that. Because what I have found just in all my interviews with leaders, sometimes I will ask CEOs, like when you take over a new leadership team, say you move between companies and you're assessing the people who are on the pre-existing team, how do you decide who stays or goes? And a lot of them say a big one is like, I want to know that they can actually make a decision. Because a lot of people are uncomfortable making decisions because making a decision implies risk, right? It also means you might be wrong, like picking A or B. And a lot of people just hang back and say, I'm not going to pick either. That way I won't be wrong. And so you have to have the courage to make the decision, and to know that you might be wrong. And if you gave me another magic wand, I'll take all you got. But one of them would be to one of them would.
Oh, too.
I often think it would be more constructive if we actually got rid of the word strategy from all business conversations and replaced it with the word bet. Because I think what companies do is they make bets, but they call them strategies because strategy sounds fancier, right? It sounds like, well, we've done the spreadsheet, Dove, and we've forecast the revenues and the profits down to the penny for the next decade. We've done, here's a 100-slide deck to show that our strategy. It's like companies make bets. They make bets on consumer behavior, client behavior. They make bets on macroeconomic forces, market forces, new technologies. Companies make bets. And if we just pause and all agree on that and be much more open about the fact that they're bets, I think that captures the spirit of what leaders do. Right. And I also think it's a great way for leaders to talk to their teams and to their companies and stop talking about strategies and say, we are making this bet on this thesis. This is our hypothesis about client, et cetera, whatever the behavior is. And if we're wrong, we're going to pivot and adjust and we'll reallocate those resources.
Yes.
But let's be clear that it's a bet. So to me, that's one of the examples, just getting comfortable with making decisions where it's all gray areas, there's no right answer, and people are going to be angry. To me, that's one of the examples. There's others too, but that's to me a big one.
You brought up something very important there that I know that in my work, I'm always saying to people, listen, if you're going to be a leader who wants everybody to like you, you're going to be a shitty leader. You might be an all right manager, you might, but you're never going to make it to leader, because leadership requires you to build a thick enough skin that you are going to hurt people. And that doesn't mean that you must lack compassion. In fact, I think you need more compassion and more empathy, which will allow you to stop. And as you said, be that reluctant leader. Like, I really like the idea of embracing being a reluctant leader, even when you're the CEO. I'm reluctant to be in this role because I'm going to piss off and hurt some people, not because I'm a rat bag, but because I'm going to have to make decisions. And what you said earlier about these leaders you interviewed, and they said, I want to find out if people can make a decision. People are terrible at making decisions. Like, people don't understand. I work with top leaders around the world, and I'm never cease to be amazed how these people are running multi-billion-dollar organizations that are all over the world, and they can't make a decision what to have for freaking breakfast. And I'm like, how do you run a company? Right? How do you manage 20,000 people and you can't make a decision to walk away from this shitty relationship you're in? How do you do that? Like, the disconnect is phenomenal. And so that willingness to not pretend it doesn't affect people, but to actually embrace that and go, I am going to really hurt some folks, and I'm never going to do it without compassion. We've all seen the TV show where the cop, he's joined the homicide unit, and this cop says to the other cop, oh my God, I just saw a dead body. How do you get used to it? And the good cop says, you don't, and that's what makes you good. Like, you never get used to hurting people as a leader. You never get used to having to make those decisions that are going to have consequences. But because you don't get used to it, you always stay compassionate. So I love that you brought that up about the reluctant leader. Like, if I'm going to retitle your book, which I love to do to people, is I'm going to call it The Reluctant Leader, How to Make the Leap from Manager to Leader. But it's being a reluctant leader, it will make you better. Am I on track here with what you're saying?
Definitely, and because that reluctance points to, it's like, be clear about what the job involves, and be clear about the work you need to do to be an effective leader, right? Because I think a lot of people talk about leadership, it's like, well, they're a boring leader. It's like, no, it's like, these are very specific skills and mindset shifts. And just to build on the point you made, it to me, I think another one that people don't talk about enough is the art of compartmentalization, because when you move into these big leadership jobs, I mean, you're under a lot of pressure, right? Like there's pressures to perform. You're dealing with people's lives, big decisions that are going to have consequences. And I think a challenge can be for a lot of people is that you're staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m, right? Because you feel the weight on these things, and these are hard jobs. And depending on how you're wired as a human being, like, this stuff can chew you up inside, right? And from all my years of managing people, I was an editor on a lot of big desks at the New York Times, and I was business editor at Newsweek. If I could change one thing about myself, it's like, I honestly, Doug, I was not that great at compartmentalizing. Like, if something was going on at work, a stressful situation or whatever, I would take that home with me, and sometimes I wouldn't sleep so well because of it. And so I always encourage leaders, like, you have got to figure out this compartmentalization game, where you can say, okay, this is the problem at work, but you can sort of think about it in a way that you put it behind a door, close the door, and then have a good sleep, and then address it in the morning. Because I find that people, it's hard to hit that balance point, right? Because some people, they've got so much empathy, they've got so much feeling, and they overthink things, and so they're really bad at compartmentalizing. At the other extreme, I've seen bosses, they're so good at compartmentalizing, they have no empathy and no compassion, right? So they're absolutely fine with making decisions to shut down entire plants or whatever, and it doesn't bother them at all. And I think there's a middle ground there. But I think it starts with just the awareness of, like, this is hard. It is an aspect of the job. You can't be beating yourself up. You cannot be perfect at these jobs. You have to give yourself a break. I often quote a guy named Bob Brennan, who's one of our mentors at the firm. He's a former CEO. He works with young CEOs very often, sort of startup, and he will hear them sort of beating themselves up because they're not hitting their targets and things like that. And he has this great line that he tells them. He said, if you talk to your friends like you talk to yourself, you would not have any friends.
Mm-hmm. That's very true.
I think it's just a great insight. You got to be a friend to yourself.
And you bring up something that is incredibly important, because research was done probably close to 20 years ago now. Again, I'm showing my age, and it talked about psychopathy, and where the most people who are psychopathic or have psychopathic tendencies are likely to find themselves in careers. And it said, the question that was put forward was to everybody else after they had results, where would you guess they are? And it was people said lawyers, and people, they said all kinds of stereotypical things. But the number one answer was CEO. CEOs have the highest level of psychopathy than any other industry. Now let's understand that to be a leader, you have to have some psychopathy. You have to have some level of that, as you said, to be able to separate one thing from another. It's when that balance gets out of balance. And again, this is this piece around why it's important to be a reluctant leader, because you need to know, I'm going to have to make those decisions that may seem very callous. And it's probably going to interfere with my sleep, because I do give a shit, but I can't let it destroy my marriage or destroy my children or destroy other areas of my life. So I think there's a danger in saying we have to compartmentalize, because people make that as a black or white. And what I think is that you have to have a compartment with a door in it, and which means that door's got to open when you need it to be, but not locking it away and pretending it doesn't matter, because as a leader, you are a leader of people. And people are humans, and they have feelings. And you are a human, and you have feelings. And if you don't align those two things, you're going to get in a lot of trouble very fast. and you might end up running for president or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I dirt my eye. Because that all-consuming desire to have your power at the cost of others is clearly not a great leader. So when you look at that, you said you would become better at it. You'd become better at compartmentalizing. One of the things we talked about in part 1 is that people don't leave jobs, they leave bad bosses. That's not our opinion, that's research. So from your point of view in this leap to leader, what is, if you were sort of saying, these are the top 3, 4, 5 things, what is a great leader? You interviewed 1,000 of them.
Yeah. And I would sort of break it down as sort of, who are they as a person and who are they as a leader, like in terms of the leadership skills. So I would start with simplifying complexity. I'd probably put that at the top of the list. I don't think you can be an effective leader if you don't have the mental skill of simplifying complexity. And the world is getting more complex, but it is a leader's job to say, okay, there's a lot going on in the world, our industry, inside our company, a lot's changing. But here is where we're going to go. And this is how we're going to get there. And this is when we're going to get there. And this is how we're going to measure progress. And these are the challenges we have to overcome. And to me, that is a leadership moment, just to be able to, whether it's an all hands meeting, stand on the stage, be on a Zoom call with everybody, but just that moment when you can simplify complexity and say, this is where we're going. This is how we're going to get there. This is when we're going to get there. To me, like, you have to have that skill. On more sort of the personal front, I would put the word trustworthiness at the top. Just the simple idea of trust, because I don't think you're going to follow somebody if you don't trust them. I think trust is one of those things that we feel it like in our gut, sort of in our lizard brain, about somebody. I mean, when I teach exec ed classes and everybody's in a full-time job at a company, sometimes I'll do pop quizzes like, how many people in the room trust their boss? Put up your hand. And Dove, I've done this many times. It is very rare that more than half the hands go up. So think about that. Like, less than half the people generally trust their boss. And the thing is, it's not like people go, oh, give me a few minutes, Adam, to think about my answer, right? Like, the answer, you feel it in your gut. And I often ask people, how many of you feel like your boss listens to you? Again, very rare that more than half the hands go up. And so if you say that, okay, you have to be trustworthy. What makes me feel like the leader is trustworthy? One of them is like, is it about you or is it about me? Is it about the organization or are you self-centered? Is that selflessness or self-centered? Is that mix off? If you feel like this is more about you than the company or the people who work for you, I'm not going to trust you. If you don't listen to me and the people around you, that means that you don't respect the people around you. So that's going to also erode my trust for you. If you tell me what your values are, if you tell me what's important to you, but I start seeing a gap between what you say and how you behave, that's going to really undermine my trust, right? And most of the people who are listening now, if you've spent a few years in the workforce, you've seen those movies, right?
Of course.
And there's so many leaders out there who say, look, this is really important to me, but there's this big gap between the walk and the talk. And boy, that really undermines trust so quickly.
And yet it's still going on. I mean, we saw it with Enron, right? The values were on the wall, and they were screwing everybody, right?
Right.
It's like, and the people inside knew,
right?
And it was like, we pride ourselves on our values,
right?
I talk about Enron, and a lot of people are going to be listening who are younger who are going like, who the hell was Enron? But it's such a, like, I see this everywhere. What's the values of your organization? And then you tell me, what does that mean? They're like doing Daffy Duck. They can't quite get it out because they've never dug into this.
Okay. Can I ask you a question, Devin?
Yeah.
If you and I agree that there are too many bad bosses and too many bad leaders in the world, why are there so many bad bosses and bad leaders in the world?
I think more than anything, that's why I said I love the thing about reluctant leader. More than anything, there's a lack of self-awareness. There's a lack of self-knowledge. People are too, I would say lazy, but I don't think it's laziness so much as is a fear of confronting their own identity, fear of confronting their own ego, their own belief systems. Because if you ask the question, do you really want to be a leader? Of course, the answer is yes, of course, on the surface. But you say, what does that mean to you? What's the cost you're likely to pay? How will it confront the identity you hold? So if you're holding an identity that I'm a really nice guy, you're gonna face your demons immediately. Well, I don't want to face my demons. So what are you going to do? You're going to be a bad boss. So I think that the number one reason there are so many bad bosses, it's my opinion, it's not the truth, in my work has shown that it is always, and I mean always, comes down to you don't have enough self-knowledge to be a leader. If you haven't done 10 years of work on yourself, like self-examination, and I'm not talking about being on a couch, although you can do that, but 10 years of asking yourself tough questions, you haven't done that, you're not really ready for leadership. That's my opinion.
Yeah. No, I like that a lot. And one of the ways I think about it too is that to become a leader means that you are sort of launching into a world of like gray and ambiguity and balancing acts and paradoxes and contradictions. And all of that is like really stressful. And if you are a manager or a leader, it's sort of like being on a stage, right? Like it's learning on the job as a manager and leader with people watching you. It's like, wow, they don't seem to know. Like that is a really stressful situation. And I think a lot of people just resort to, like just black and white. And they say, well, I'm going to lead like this. And in some ways, it's a lot easier to be a bad boss, right?
Oh.
Like I think part of the reason why they do that, right? I was saying being a bad boss like is a great time management hack, because if you spend 0% of your time asking your staff, like, how are you doing? Anything I can help you with? Any like blocks that I can take out of your way? You can save a lot of time doing that.
That's very true. A shitty boss is actually an easier job. Yeah, it's very good. And for me, when you're talking about a good boss versus a bad boss, I think that you've got to have an anchor point. And I think that bad bosses don't have an anchor point. They're doing a job, a job. They're getting paid more, but they're still doing a job. And whereas a good boss will have an anchor point. Now, I can disagree with that anchor point. I can be totally disagree with it, but that just tells me I need to go somewhere else. It doesn't mean that they're a bad boss. It means they're a bad boss for me. But being a good boss means I have an anchor point. What's your anchor point? This is the purpose and meaning of my life. This is the purpose and meaning of the organization. This is how those two things come together. And this is how and why I lead the way I lead, because I'm always tied to that anchor point. Is that in alignment with you? Yes. Then we are going to make magnificent things happen. But if you don't have that, you're out in the ocean without a bloody rudder, trying to move, swing the sail from side to side, but there's no rudder, so you're at the whim of the wind. And I think that that's a big point of what makes a bad leader. They're not willing to say, let me sink the anchor. This is what matters to me. And without that, you're dead in the water.
Yeah. And there are so many people who they have a good talk track, right? Like they say all the right things. And I think if you're like a new employee, you get really excited, right? It's like, wow, it sounds like everything's great. But then over time, you find out it's like when they're shapeshifters, right? When under stress, under pressure, like their values, they let go of them. And that's why I think it's so disheartening as an employee when you have that experience, because it's like that Charlie Brown cartoon where Lucy's going to hold the football for Charlie Brown and she sort of always pulls it away at the last minute. For employees who like they join a company, they're really excited. It seems like a great boss, a great leader. I'm so excited. And then you realize, wow, they keep pulling away the football, right? They're not who they say they are. And that's when you become cynical, when you start shutting down. It's really disappointing.
I agree. So as we come towards the end of the second part of the show here, I would really love, because, you're so well researched. So I would really love, so let's say we've got however many thousands of managers who are listening, who are good managers. They want to take that leap. But hopefully we've made them think about some of the things that they may not have thought about. I would really love for you to say, like, what could they go away and do in the next, certainly the next 24 hours, but maybe the next week, that would really be practical in helping them to work out, A, if they want to make the leap, and B, how to make it. Would you be willing to do that for us?
Yeah. So I would encourage them to take one blank sheet of paper and put 3 questions on it. And the first question is, what to you is the difference between management and leadership?
Yes.
And just get clear in your own head. The second question is, do you really want to lead? And if so, why? And spend the time answering to yourself why you want the job. And then the third question would be what I mentioned earlier, which is, what is your answer to the question, who are you as a leader? What are your, say, 3 values that are really important to you for driving success? And how and why did they become important? It's not just about finding good words and phrases, right? Make them real, make them authentic. Tell me the story of how and why those values became important to you. And I think if you spend the time, the work, really, quiet room, just you and yourself, honest answers to those questions, I think that those are sort of the initial provocations you need to wrestle with as a big part of making that leap to leadership.
I realize that I could be opening a can of worms here into a whole other show, but I'm going to ask this because of the work you've done and the research that you've done. In this context of manager to leader, how do you think the aftermath of the pandemic and the now emergence of AI, how has that impacted that framework of manager to leader? I said, I realize I could be opening a can of worms.
Yeah, no, to me, it's all of part of the context that I think managing and leading has gotten 5 to 10 times harder. We can debate on how much harder, but I think it's gotten a lot harder. And I think is with the introduction of AI, like AI is just going to do a better job of taking care of stuff that we're already doing. What AI can't figure out is the higher order stuff. Like, what is the virgin snow? Like, what are the big questions, the unknowns? And so I just think as we're hurtling into the future here, just like being a good manager and good leader is never been more important, and it's never been harder. And I think all the time that people can spend investing in themselves as managers and leaders, doing the external work on how to, work with people, the internal work, getting your head right about what it means, I just think the ROI on that is huge.
Thank you so much. It's been, as always, a great pleasure, Adam. Thank you. Before we go, I want you to make sure that everybody knows where they can find out about you, about the book, and all the wonderful resources.
Thank you. So my personal website is adambryantbooks.com, and I work for a firm called the XCO Group, but our website is XCO Leadership, EXCO Leadership.com.
And again, we'll make sure that is posted in the show notes. It's Adam Bryant, that's Bryant, books with a plural, with the S on the end. AdamBryantBooks.com is where his main site is. You can find out more. As I said, we'll make sure all that's posted for you. Adam, I want to thank you again for being with us. It's been a pleasure and honor, sir. Thank you as always. Love our conversations. And for you, dear listener, remember that those who control the meaning for the tribe also control the movement of the tribe. Whether it's business or political leaders who are committed to positively shaping the political and business landscape, they know that you got to tap into what drives human behavior. And you can do that groundbreaking work with the understanding of applying the anatomy of meaning extracted from the emotional source code of individuals and organizations, even nations, to transform meaning. I'm Dov Baron. I show businesses, teams, and leaders how to harness their emotional source code to move their tribe, because unified, actualized meaning is the single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for all individuals and companies. I want to thank you for sharing this show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about what it means to make the leap from manager to leader, and the really deep personal questions you need to confront within yourself rather than just jumping on the bandwagon of what's next in the ambition scale. So I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you, tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.